Lately, there's been a lot of conversation over AI and how it's taken everyone's jobs.
They took our jobs! They took our jobs!
And honestly, I think this whole thing is stupid. Especially when folks are negative and they're taking people's professional hopes and dreams and stomping on them over something that may or may not even be true. So in this video, I'm going to give you a few arguments against that whole narrative. Argument number one, when tools get better and work becomes more efficient, that actually increases demand for that kind of work, not decreases it. Why? Well, look back to the past. When the 3D tools that we all use right now were first made. Let's say, you go back to Pixar and ILM and when this was all first being made, the demand for this stuff was pretty much zero, right? But what happened over time? The tools got better and they got better and better and better. And what's happened to the market share? What's happened to the demand for this kind of work? It's grown and grown and grown and grown. So if you're going to tell me that a tool comes around that makes work faster and more efficient, and yet somehow reduces the amount of demand from that market, then my question to you is, why hasn't it done so in the past? Because it didn't do so when, let's say, VDBs were invented. It didn't do so when, let's say, compositing applications like Nuke were first invented. It actually accelerated demand for the 3D artist. And so look back to the past, look at previous innovations, and recognize that AI in many ways is no different if it's just a tool that makes things more efficient. I'll also add to that when a great innovative tool comes around, that's good news for small and mid-sized studios that need to compete against the large studios. Right now, we're in an industry that's primarily dominated by very large studios, and that's not very healthy for the average 3D artist. If you don't want to work at Disney or ILM or any of their subsidiaries, what other options do you have? What other small and mid-sized studios are out there that can honestly pay you in a similar way and or provide cool projects to enhance your resume? Well, unfortunately, the answer is not enough. So if a good tool comes around, like AI, and Sora AI as an example, and that gives an edge to small or mid-sized studios, and they figure out how to leverage that against the big guys, that gives you more bargaining power as a 3D artist, because now you have more options for employment. Argument number two, people like to pretend that new technology has unlimited potential, but it never does. That's because reality has natural constraints. It has natural limitations in place that make it impossible for certain new developments to do anything it wants. Let me give you an example. If you were to take a time portal all the way back to when the car was first invented and you went through some of those newspaper articles, I wonder how many articles you can find in there about how cars are going to be flying in the next 10 years and how pretty soon we're going to just commute to work on a speed bus in the air and we're just going to, all have our personal flying cars. Well, there was a lot of talk about that, and the justification, the argument is always, well, but technology, it's moving so fast, and so why couldn't it do it in the next 2 or 3 years? Why? Because in reality has limitation as to what that technology can do. The old adage of anything is possible is completely a lie. It's not true. It's not to say that you shouldn't dream big. It's not to say that you shouldn't not have faith in new ideas, but it is to say that not everything is possible. Let me give you an example of what that looks like with AI, okay? As a 3D artist, you are in the game of providing specific results. If someone needs to have a commercial made, it needs to be their specific product. If there's a movie made, it needs to be on that specific alien planet with those specific characters doing very specific things. And with AI, the way that this technology works is you need to train it on data that already exists. So if someone was to come to a 3D artist and make something that's never been made before, which is probably why they're approaching a 3D artist in the first place, then how are you going to make that happen? And how are you going to train the AI on things that, again, have never existed before, on creating something new? It's just not what the technology is designed to do. It's not how it works. There's a fundamental limitation with how this works and what it can do. And already I can hear the echoes of many of you screaming at your computer right now and finding some kind of way to justify technology and how it's going to figure out these problems somehow in the future, and it's just going to arbitrarily get past all those blocks. Yeah, well, okay, back to the topic of imagination for a second. Many of you want to live in your imagination rather than think about arguments in a practical, realistic sense. And that's not a good idea when you are potentially putting your entire career on the line over some kind of argument that's arbitrarily just going to work itself out in the future. I just don't think that the conversation should stop there. That to me says many of you are looking for an excuse to not work hard, to give up, and to find some kind of justification for your pain and suffering. Argument number 3. The reason why AI could be a great thing for 3D artists is because it scares away other 3D artists. Think about this for a second, okay? You need to make a movie, a multi-billion-dollar profit machine of a movie, okay? And you need, I don't know, 30 texture artists. And not just any texture artists, but texture artists that are the best, that are great people to work with, that are talented, and they have a bit of experience. Well, how many of those people exist in the world? Not as many as you might think. Again, we need somebody who's talented, somebody who's good to work with, and somebody who has some experience. That number of people is not huge, I can promise you. And when AI comes around as one of the reasons why people decide to leave the industry, what does that do to the talent pool? Brings it down. And sometimes it brings it down a lot. Now, right now, it's not just AI that's shrinking down this talent pool of high-quality workers. There's also been writer strikes lately. There's also been the fact that the movie and TV business in general has been racing to the bottom to try to offer as much content for $10 with streaming platforms. There's also been just a lack of generally high-quality content. A lot of movie studios and productions and TV shows are trying to just throw stuff out the window and not care about quality. There's been a lot of that going on at the same time. And so for all of those reasons, it's taken this pool of talent and shrunken this down. So what does that mean for the artists who still remain? It means that they have more bargaining power than they've ever had before to negotiate a higher wage. Right? Let's say, again, back to our example, I have that billion-dollar movie I got to make, and I need 30 texture artists, but I can only find 10 texture artists. That's a big problem. So what if an 11th texture artist comes around and says, you know what, Tyler, I'm going to charge you twice as much as the guy you just hired, as number 10. What am I going to do? I need 30 talented artists and I can only find 10 right now. So yeah, I'm going to hire that guy for double the price of what I just hired the same position at just a minute ago. And so even if everyone else around you is willing to, hire their services out for cheap, that doesn't mean that you can't negotiate a higher wage. It just doesn't work like that. It's more about how much demand is there for this work, and as long as the demand outpaces the supply, that means as a talented artist, you can charge a very high amount. So to make a long story short, it's all about supply and demand. If AI scares away other artists, supply goes down, it gives you more leverage to negotiate with. All that needs to happen right now in this marketplace is for demand to go back up a little bit. It probably will. Normally markets oscillate. They go up and they go down and they go up again. Normally there is that movement over time. So when that happens, when we are on an upswing again and we have a low supply of workers, that's going to be a big problem for production. And that problem is going to work to your advantage as a 3D artist. Assuming, of course, that you ask for it. Many of you don't ask for it. Many of you have terrible self-confidence issues. But even if people around you don't have that self-confidence, don't have that self-worth, it doesn't matter because demand is outpacing the number of workers. And like I said before, you can charge a lot more than everyone else does if you simply ask in that environment. And my last argument, number 4, is that OpenAI and specifically the recent developments with Sora AI are all designed to be a dog and pony show. In other words, they just need to show the flashiest thing they possibly can to convince everyone that they hold the keys to the future. And as long as they do that, they can convince billions of dollars to pour into their company. That's what they're in the business of doing. And this whole concept of selling a narrative is nothing new. We've seen this with FTX and Bitcoin, right? That was a big one. That was a huge scandal where, a narrative was sold for millions and millions and millions of dollars. That's happened with SPACs as well. Again, as long as you have a good salesperson there in front of the camera, and as long as you can make it flashy enough, then millions of dollars come their way, right? Because people think that they know the future. And I think in many ways, the name of the game is still true here with AI, specifically with OpenAI. A lot of money has been made based off of this narrative. And if you're somebody who's thinking, well, man, this thing's going to take over the world. Let me ask you, are you being caught up in this narrative? Because it's designed to be as potent as possible. There is a multi-billion-dollar incentive for this narrative and for this technology to look as flashy as possible. So are you getting caught up in the pretty stars and the flashy demos? If the answer is yes, then I would not take it as seriously as you are. Just because of the fact that, again, there is a huge commercial incentive to make that look appealing as possible and to cherry pick its capabilities and to overstate its capabilities as much as possible. Let's now summarize this whole thing, okay? If you are somebody who is worried about AI taking your job as a 3D artist, I would disagree. And I would go further to say that actually it probably has the opposite effect for all the reasons we just mentioned. So don't listen to the people that are negative. There's a lot of people right now that are out of work, that are looking for a justification to live in their imagination and not in reality. And those are exactly the kind of people that want to spread their misery to you so that you can't be successful. Be sure to leave your perfectly courteous and wonderful comments down below. If they are not courteous and wonderful, if instead they are a heaping dumpster fire, then I will absolutely delete it because I believe in promoting positive conversation, not nihilistic, bitter, negative conversation around this topic. That's all I got for now. Good luck, guys. See ya.